Hey everybody, Justin from Fireside Games here, and today I'm going to show you how to play Kaiju Crush. This is our newest game, and it is about giant monsters smashing a city, trying to get points along the way. They're going to fight, of course, that's what giant monsters do. You're going to use some special abilities and all that stuff, and we got an interesting movement mechanic I'll show you. But for now, let's take a closer look at the components, then I'll talk to you about setup. So Kaiju Crush includes 4 different monsters. They each come with a plastic stand. They also have a monster tile, and they each have a unique ability that they can use in combat. There are 5 different movement cards, and these are the different movement options that your monster will have throughout the game. There are 6 objective cards in the game. These are bonuses that players are going to try to compete during the game, and the trick is there are 2 C's and 2 D's, but you'll only be playing with one at a time, so there will only ever be 4 objective cards in play at any one time. There are 13 special ability cards, and these are single-use only enhancements that players are going to use to power up their monsters. There are 38 city tiles that are included in the game. Each building is worth anywhere from 1 to 5 points, and it belongs to one of the 4 different groups. And those groups are community, power, transportation, and commercial. There are also parks, which don't belong to any group and can never be claimed. And then there are wild cards, which can be scored as any of the 4 groups. The other thing to watch out for is some of the cards are meant only for use in a certain number of players per game. So if it doesn't have an icon, it's used in a 2-player game, a 3-player game, and a 4-player game. However, you'll notice the icon in the bottom right corner says either this is used in a 3- and 4-player game only, and this is used in a 4-player game only. So you want to keep track of that when you're building your city. You'll also get territory markers, which the players are going to use every time they smash a city tile. They'll replace it with their territory marker, showing that they control it. The back of these territory markers also has a series of icons on it that are going to be used whenever players fight battles. The game also includes 20 combat victory tokens. This is what's awarded to the winning player after a player wins a battle, and they come in a point range of 1, 2, or 3 points, but they're going to be drawn face down, so you won't know the points you have until you've actually claimed one. Lastly, there are 4 reference cards included, and these are just for you to keep near you to remind you of things you need to know as you're playing the game. So to set up Kaiju Crush, first things first, you're going to want to pick which monster you want to be. There's 4 monsters in the game, and they each have their own special ability that applies to combat. You can pick it based on that ability, whichever you prefer. You can pick them at random, or you can pick whichever one looks the coolest. In this case, we're going to show you a 2-player game setup. So to set up the city grid, which is the next step, what you're going to want to do is mix in the monster cards with the city tiles that you're using. But remember, not every city tile is used in every game. You're going to want to pay attention to the icon in the bottom corner. It tells you whether it's for a 2-player game, a 3-player game, or a 4-player game. Once you've mixed them all in, go ahead and build it based on a grid. Now for a 2-player game, it's a 5x6 grid. For a 3-player game, it's a 6x6 grid. And for a 4-player game, it's a 7x6 grid. The monster tiles are going to show up mixed in with the city. You're going to want to replace those with a territory marker that matches the monster, and then that's your monster starting place. This way, every monster is randomly distributed on the board. You've got your first crater, and we're ready to move on to movement cards. So to deal out the movement cards, you're always going to deal out 1 more than there are players in the game, and that means you're going to have to remove a couple of cards for fewer players. So in a 2-player game, you will remove Stomp and Charge. In a 3-player game, you will remove Charge. And in a 4-player game, you will use all 5 cards. So since I'm only doing a 2-player game here, I'm going to put these 2 away, and then we will deal them out randomly. Each player gets 1 in front of them, and the extra card becomes the shared card. It's always going to be off to the side, available for later. We'll talk about that when we get to how movement cards actually work. So to set up the objective cards, you want to put 4 of them in play, but the game comes with 6 of them. That's because there are 2 C's and 2 D's. So the first thing you're going to want to do is choose randomly which C's and which D's are in play. And then every one of these objective cards is double-sided with a different objective goal. So you're going to want to mix those up a little bit, decide maybe this one's up, this one's down. You can toss them, flip them, whatever works for you. But the idea is you've got a lot of replay you can play with here for different objectives. Now we'll go over how these objectives are scored later in the game, but this is what you'll need for setup, is 1 each of an A, B, C, and D objective card. So the next step then is to give out special ability cards. Shuffle them all up, and then you'll want to deal 2 special ability cards to each player. The player gets to look at both of them, decide which one they want to keep and which one they want to give back. That goes back into the main deck. And they keep the card they have face up in front of them. Now, normally, this deck of special ability cards can simply go back in the box. You won't need it again. However, if you're ever using the Powerhouse ability, which is a D, it actually has reference to getting more special ability cards. So if you are playing with this one, you will want to keep this deck nearby. Otherwise, it can go back in the box. So the final steps for setup are to make sure each player has their territory markers. You want to give these a shuffle and make sure they're crater side up. You want to have your monster tile in front of you, and each player should have a reference card to refer to when you play. Then you're going to want to take the combat victory tokens, mix those up and keep them all face down where everyone can get to them. So last thing is then to decide who the first player is. We do that by taking one territory marker from each player, mixing them up at random, and picking one. In this case, green is going to be our first player for this game. Now we are ready to go. So on your turn, you're going to have two actions you're going to perform. You're going to move based on one of the movement cards available to you, and then you're going to collect a city tile that you crush when you land on it, and you might possibly battle if there's another monster nearby. So movement, you're always going to have two options available to you. There's the card that's in front of you, and there's the shared movement card. You can use either one of these, but the rules are if you use the shared movement card, it stays here. If you use your own movement card, it will swap and become the new shared movement cards. This is going to mean the movement cards get passed around a lot during the game, and you're going to have lots of different options, and you're going to lose certain options as the game moves on. Let's take a closer look at these two options, Dash and Leap, and what they're going to get for our first player. So Galathor is our first player, and he has two options available to him, Leap and Dash. These cards tell you where your monster is going to end their movement, and there's a couple of basic rules you need to remember. Monsters can't go off the edge of the board, you can't land on a space that has already been crushed and has a crater tile on it, and you can move through other monsters if you need to. You can also land on a space with another monster, but that will trigger a fight, which we'll get to when we cover combat. So let's look at the two options now. We have Leap and we have Dash. Dash is pretty straightforward. It's just two, up, down, left, right. So that would get us to the landmark, the first aid, or fire station rather, or the restaurant. Now, we can't go off the edge of the board, so we can't use that option. If we look at Leap, it moves like a knight in chess, getting us a few more options, meaning it's out 2 and over 1, and it can be left or right. So I can go to the oil refinery, the gas station, the park, the library, the bridge, the freeway. And we want to pay attention to the point values and the groups because we know that's going to be used for scoring. So looking at this, I think Leap is the best option. Now, that means that using my own card, I have to swap it out with the shared card. So Dash now becomes my card. Leap is now the shared card. And I'm going to go ahead and move to the oil refinery, which means I go over 2 and 1. I replace the oil refinery with a territory marker. And the oil refinery now goes in front of me face up. This is my first tile that I've collected, and it'll be worth points at the end of the game. So now it's the next player's turn, and Draximus over here still has the option of using the Leap, which is the new shared card, but also Trample, which is their own card. Looking at that, let's take a look at their options. Trample would get him to the restaurant, the jewelry store, a park in the corner, or the elevated train down here. And Leap would get him to the flower shop, the park, the power plant, the bridge, or unfortunately nothing up here because these would be off the edge of the board. So one thing to note is parks. Parks are very special. When you land on a park, you immediately have to take a second movement, but you'll have access to either the shared card or your regular card again. You can't end your movement on a park. You sort of bounce off of them. So in that case, let's say that's what Draximus decides to do. He uses the Leap card, which is shared, so it stays in play. He doesn't have to swap because he hasn't played his card yet. The Leap gets him to the park. Then he decides this 4-point police station is looking pretty good. So he does use his Trample for his second movement, which means Leap is switched out now. Trample is now the shared community card. The police station belongs to Draximus. Goes in his pile, be counted as points for later. And that's the second part of his turn. He's not adjacent to another monster or on the same space, so there's no fighting, so that's the end of his turn. So one thing to note when you're smashing city tiles and collecting them is that wilds have to be assigned to a group right when you smash them. So if Draximus comes in and claims the radio tower, it can count as any of the 4 groups in the game, but when you pick it up, you have to assign it to one. So in this case, if I want to make a whole bunch of points in the community group, I might assign it to the community group, but I can put it with any of the 4 groups. The reason this matters is the objective card B is based on having the most or the fewest of a group, so you may want to keep that in mind as you're collecting these tiles. So as the game continues, more and more city tiles are going to be claimed, which means they've left craters. And remember, you can never move to a space that's been claimed, even if it's your own color. So your movement options may get limited. In this case, Draximus is looking at Dash and Trample are his only movement options. But if we look, Trample, 1 space diagonal, those are already claimed. And he has the same issue with Dash. Everything 2 spaces away is either off the edge of the board or has already been claimed. That means Draximus can't move, so he's going to have to pass on the movement phase of his turn, which just ends his turn. Once all the players have passed, that's how we know the game is over. We end the game, we'll count up score after everyone has passed. So whenever giant monsters are in vicinity of each other, there's probably a good chance they're going to battle. On your turn, if you land either adjacent to another monster or in the same space as a monster, you can choose to have a fight if you want to. If you have an adjacent battle, the winner of that battle is going to get a combat victory point. If you have a territory battle, the winner's going to get not only a combat victory point, but they're also going to get to replace this territory marker. So if the green player wins, they would get to put theirs down, which can really change the board and get you some extra bonus points. Regardless of how a battle starts, they're always fought the same. Each player is going to draw the top 5 cards from their territory markers, and all of those have icons on the back. They're going to compare these icons in a one-on-one match to see who wins. And the way they work are, you have your 3 basic attacks. Claw always beats tail, tail always beats kick, and kick always beats claw. That's pretty easy. But fire breath beats all 3 of the basic attacks, and all 3 of the basic attacks will beat spikes. Here's the catch though, spikes is the only card that will beat fire breath. So playing these cards, you have to sort of take a little bit of a risk as to what you think your opponent's going to play. Again, each player is going to have 5. They're going to look at it, choose which one they want to play. They'll turn it face up at the same time, comparing the values and determining a winner. The winner of that round gets 1 credit for that round, but the person who wins the most rounds is the one who's going to be the battle, and it's the best out of 5. We'll have a simulated battle here to show you. So, Draximus and Galathor are about to have an adjacent battle. Now, Draximus' special ability is that after they draw their territory markers, they can get rid of as many as they want and draw new ones. So each player has gotten their territory markers, they've looked at them and made their first choice, which is a tie, claw versus claw. Anytime it's a tie, however, it's considered a loss for both players. So that a loss is indicated by keeping the tile face down, and then each player chooses their next one, and we get a leg sweep. The tail beats the leg, so the kick is gone. Poor Galathor is taking a little bit of a beating there. We move on to our 3rd round. Aha, it's another tie, fire breath versus fire breath. But here's the catch. Normally, ties are a loss. Galathor's special ability is that he wins on ties of fire breath or spikes. So this is actually a win for our big green monster. Our 4th one is another leg battle. So in this case, Draximus goes down to a leg sweep. And our final battle is, aha, Spikes versus Fire Breath. Spikes are the only one that can beat Fire Breath, so even though Galathor tried, he couldn't pull it off, and Draximus ended up getting 2. So this is actually a tie. 2 versus 2. They both won the same number of rounds, which means the battle is a tie, and when it's a tie, the defender wins. So Draximus goes ahead, draws 1 combat victory token face down and flips it face up. Oh, it's a 2. There are mostly 1s, a few 2s, and a couple of 3s in the game, so he's going to keep this secret, and that'll be worth points at the end of the game. You'll always get combat victory points every time you fight, but if this had been a battle for territory, and it had been a tie like this, Draximus would have kept his space. Let's imagine, though, that Galathor had won. He'd had 3-2. That would mean Galathor would have won the territory battle, kicking out Draximus' territory marker and replacing it with his own, which is a great way to get more points in the game for bonuses on objective cards and things like that. So combat gives you all sorts of ways to make points. You're definitely going to want to beat up on your fellow monsters. You can use your special ability card once per game, and when you do, it just gets discarded from play. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. There are a few things to keep in mind, though. Some cards will specifically mention adjacent, either sometimes to an opponent or a different card, and adjacent means any space. It doesn't have to be diagonal or just up, down, left, right, anything adjacent. A couple other things are most cards are played on your turn. They can play any time on your turn, before or after you move kind of thing. Quantum Evasion is a little bit different. This is one that you play to get out of combat, which means you might play this when someone else attacks you, so you're playing it on their turn. So keep an eye on that. A couple of other ones that need a little bit of clarification. Spatial Manipulation lets you swap the position of any 2 face-up tiles that are adjacent to each other. That could include a park tile, which normally those never get messed with in the game. Geoleap lets you break the rule of not being able to go off the edge of the board because you wrap around to the opposite side. So in this example, if Draximus over here played his dash card, normally he wouldn't be able to go this way because it exceeds the edge of the board, but in this case, he wraps around for 2, landing on the cinema. Super Agility is the last one we'll mention. It lets you move 1 space fewer when you're using Charge, Dash, or Stomp. Now, Stomp only lets you move 1 space, which means if you played Super Agility, you actually wouldn't move at all, but you will have played a movement card. So that can be some good strategy to use in the game. So let's talk about objective cards. There's 4 of them in the game, A, B, C, and D, and we'll start with talking about the A objective cards. These are based on the biggest and the smallest areas you control on the board. So Concentrated is the first side of the A objective card, and it's based on your largest single area. So that means you look at, excluding diagonals, only looking at orthogonal related spaces, What's your biggest area? In this case, green gets 1 point for his biggest area, each tile in his biggest area. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is blue's largest area. Blue gets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the number of bonus points each player would get. Blue would get 6, green would get 7. Now, the opposite of that is spread, and it means the opposite. You now get 1 point for each area you control on the board. So it doesn't matter how big it is, each area is worth 1 point. So now green has 1, 2, 3, 4 areas, and blue has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas. 4 points for green, 5 points for blue. That's how the A card works. So the B objective cards are based on how many or how few you have of each group at the end of the game. So here we show the tiles have been arranged in the way the player scored them in order of groups, and this makes it easy to compare when you're scoring this card. So in this case, Avoider is about having the fewest of each group, and it's easiest to do it group by group. So let's go ahead and talk about the transportation group. Well, obviously, Galathor has a lot of transportation, so the fewest would go to Draximus. Draximus gets 2. Then we look at the community. Community is, Draximus has more. Galathor gets 2 points for the fewest. Power, definitely Draximus has the most, so Galathor gets another 2, putting him at 4. And then Draximus has fewer of the commercial, so that's 4 points for each player. That happened to work out remarkably even. We can also flip that around and see the opposite. Hoarder, which is just like it sounds, it's the most. Whoever has the most gets an additional 2 points. So in this case, it's 2 points to Draximus for power, 2 points for community, and then Galathor gets 2 points for the most transportation and 2 points for the most commercial. Now the difference is, however, players might have played different depending on which of these was face up. So even though in this example it scores the same, it can score very different depending on what players go for and which bonus they're trying to reach. The C cards are based on having specific shapes on the board in terms of where your territory markers are. So this is one of those things where combat, taking spaces away from someone, can get really important. Let's look at square and line. They're pretty self-explanatory, but one thing you need to understand is that you can count overlapping. So since square is about having 4 in that specific shape, green can count 1 square here, you can also count 1 square here. Even though they overlap, that counts as 2, and it's 3 points for each one, so that's 6 points right there. Looking over at blue, they did the same thing, 2 overlapping squares, so this is 6 points for each player. Now the opposite of that is line. You have to have 4 in a row, but you still get 3 points. And once again, it looks like our players actually did that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 3 points for each of them. Now in reality, this probably wouldn't look like this because players would play very differently when going for a line than they would when going for a square. But this example shows you how to score both sides of this C card. Now let's take a look at the next C card. So the second of the C objective cards is also based on shapes, but these are different. Now we've got an orthogonal layout and a diagonal layout. It's all based on the idea of around a center space you have those. One important note here is that you don't have to have the card or the tile in the middle or any of the extra ones. You just have to be able to mark out these specific shapes. So let's take a look at ortho and see how the players did. Looking for that specific pattern, I can see that green got one here and blue got one over here. So each of these players was able to score an ortho. They're each worth 3 points. Now, if the game had been different and they had been going for diagonal, we can look and see that yes, they actually would have scored it there too. Here's the diagonal for green, and here's the diagonal for blue. Again, 3 points every time you score one of these. That's how the C cards work. The D objective cards work a little bit different. They're not about endgame scoring. Instead, these cards are passed around during the game based on the player that has the most tiles in whatever group is described. In this particular example, Powerhouse, it's based on whoever has the most tiles in the power group. They're going to get to control this card and use this ability. So here's an example of how it works. Galathor moves down to the oil refinery, which is a 3 point of the power group. That means he's taken more than anyone else because it's early in the game. He gets the Powerhouse card. He'll have that ability. On the next turn, let's say Draximus comes over to the power plant, taking it as his own. Now, even though it's a 4 point power group card, remember, the points don't matter. It's just the number of tiles. So now they're equal. That means while it's true that Galathor may still own this card, he can't use the power anymore. In fact, it's better to think of it as back in play. Essentially, no one owns the Powerhouse card. So Galathor's next turn, let's say he gets a different tile that's not related to the power suit, and Draximus decides to get the wind farm, which is related to the power suit. Now, Draximus has 2 cards in the power group. That means, yes, he has the most. He gets the Powerhouse card and can use it for the rest of the game until another player gets at least 3 power tiles, then they would take it away from him. So there are 4 different options that can come up with the D objective cards because each card is double-sided. Each one has a different ability and it's based on a different group. So let's go over a couple of them real quick here. Powerhouse is based on the power group, and if you have the most and you have Powerhouse, after you play your special ability card, you get to draw a new one from the deck of special ability cards. Just draw the top card and put it back into play. Now, the trick is if you already don't have a special ability card because you played it, you get to draw a new one, so you'll always have a special ability card if you have Powerhouse in play. And the opposite of that is Movement Mimic. If you have this one, which requires having the most of the transportation group, then you're going to be able to use not only your own movement card, but the shared movement card and the movement card of the player to your left. You have 3 different choices when it's time to move. You don't have to swap those cards out, the player to your left, but you do have access to it. So it's a pretty powerful movement ability. Civil Servant is based on having the most of the community group. And if you do, that means your terrain markers can be used as parks by all players in the game. So this one isn't particularly a benefit to you, although you can use it. It actually benefits all players. And then lastly is Commerce King. If you have the most commercial groups at the start of your turn, you will draw 1 combat victory token, and keep it. No matter what the point value is, you get to keep it. Only if you have this inactive at the start of your turn. You need to keep this one in play if you want to get the free points for that. That's how the D cards work. One important thing to note about the D objective cards is that when the last tile of a group is claimed and removed from the board, the D card that was connected to that group is immediately removed from the game and the bonus is no longer in effect. So once it's gone, it's gone. So when all players have passed and there are no more moves that can be made, the game is over and now it's time to add up scoring. We have included a score sheet on the back of the rulebook. This will be really helpful when you're trying to keep track of all the different points you make, and you can also make copies of this if you need to. The easiest way to start is to go ahead and total up all the points you made for the city tiles that you collected. We've done the math on this, and it turns out Draximus has 32 and Galathor has 34. Once you've done that, you move on to the bonus objective cards. In this case, A is spread, where you get 1 point for each unique group that you've got. So blue is going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bonus points, and green is going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bonus points. Moving on to the B objective card, this is Avoider. This is where you get 2 points for having the fewest of each group of city tiles that you scored. So looking here, we've got 2 points for Draximus, 2 points for Galathor. They tied here, so they both get 2, and then 2 more points for Draximus for having the fewest of that group. Lastly, for bonus objective cards, here we've got C, which is Ortho. So now we're looking to see, were the players able to get their terrain tiles to match these shapes? And looking here, we can see that yes, Galathor did get an Ortho there, and Draximus got an Ortho up here. So they're both going to go ahead and get 3 points for that. The final scoring thing that matters is your combat victory points. So flip these over, add them up, and let's see who is king of the hill. We've got 6 for Galathor, only 2 for Draximus. That means the final score is 54 for Galathor, 53 for Draximus. So congratulations, Galathor. You are the king of the city. You have become the best kaiju. That is how Kaiju Crush works. This is a game for 2 to 4 players. Takes about 45 minutes. If you're interested in learning more, please go to firesidegames.com, download a copy of the rules, check it out for yourself. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We have how to play videos for all of our games. If you want to learn a little more, we're happy to answer questions. Follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. We have a newsletter we send out once per month, so if you're interested in getting even more info, there's a lot of ways to follow us. I hope you all had fun learning how to play Kaiju Crush, and I hope you have even more fun smashing your local favorite city, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.